Okay.
Okay, welcome everybody.
Here, I'm just going to introduce you. Sorry about that. I was just waiting for the recording to kick in. Usually there's a bit of a lag there. So welcome everybody to the last presentation we have in Stream 2 today from the Digital Transformation in Government Conference for 2023. Today, we have a great presentation. We're going to have a Q&A panel discussion with Dr. Danica Marsden, who comes to us from Principal Quantum Computing Science at Bank of Canada, and has been has the experience of maximizing the impact of new technologies in their role of the Bank of Canada, developing the first quantum strategy for the bank, as well as internal training materials for computing. And hold on a second, I'm missing some text there. Sorry about that. And she defines and oversees projects in applying quantum computing to central banking research and advises on post-quantum cryptography solutions. She's got her PhD in physics from the University of Pennsylvania and was a Keck Institute for the Space Studies postdoctoral fellow at Caltech. And she holds a certificate in project management from UBC's Sauder School of Business. Welcome, Dr. Marsden. And I can hand it off to you if you like. But for everybody online, the way this will work is that she will be accepting and answering questions throughout. So don't be shy. We'll sort of see those questions and manage them in the best way we can. And so please, let's begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, welcome everybody. The chat should be available for you. I'd be curious to know what people's backgrounds are and what questions you have, what you're looking to get out of this session. So feel free to put that in the chat if you want. I guess I'll just expand a little bit more on my career path, since that's sort of what this is about a bit. I started out a while ago in Vancouver at UBC as an undergrad in physics and astronomy. And so I actually started out, my first career was in academia, doing experimental astrophysics, so building telescopes to study the far universe. I did a PhD in the States at the University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League school in Philadelphia. And then I wound up doing a postdoc at Caltech, which I believe Jean-Pierre Lapierre mentioned. And then, so I got to travel the world doing that. And then I decided to leave academia because once I was a postdoc, I realized that I didn't want to carry on in that path. But there is no astrophysics outside of academia, really. So I spent some time looking around at the landscape of potential jobs that I could translate my background to, and wound up, I interviewed at SpaceX and all kinds of companies, but I actually wound up over in energy. Originally I'd been thinking solar, but I wound up in actually oil and gas for a couple of years doing new technology development. So looking at exploring new technologies that would make extracting oil cleaner and greener. And then from there, I wound up transitioning into quantum computing. So first building quantum computers, I worked at a couple of startup companies. And now I've transitioned to working for the Bank of Canada, looking to apply quantum computers to problems in economics and finance, as well as operations. So the Bank of Canada, prints banknotes and sends them around the country. So that's a logistics operations problem, as well as we've looked at applying quantum computing to optimizing systems of payments. So when you're sending a payment from the Royal Bank of Canada to Scotiabank, it goes through this backbone infrastructure system that the Bank of Canada is involved with. And along the way, there have been some, twists and turns, but I think, having worked at organizations of all different sizes, from very small to very large, as well as in industry, academia, and government, I might be well suited to answer your questions. I don't see any questions yet. And I have also applied actually in the past to be an astronaut. So I was in the top 100 candidates in the 2016 Canadian astronaut selection, which people might find interesting as well.
That's very interesting. So maybe I can start get the ball rolling with questions. We're talking about quantum computing and cybersecurity and that sort of thing. I'm wondering if you could basically sort of give us what we can expect, over the next while in terms of what people are working on. There's some doomsayers out there, I guess, that are looking at things, and just wondering if what your take on those things in terms of password protections and that aspect of security from a personal perspective, and as well as from an organizational perspective.
Sure, yeah, we know there already exists an algorithm, Shor's algorithm, which is proven to have the capability of decrypting most of our modern day cryptography, encryption protection that we use to safeguard our health information, our financial information. So actually the entire internet is going to have to be upgraded. And at the Bank of Canada, we are participating in upgrading systems, working with vendors. I mean, everybody, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, everybody's going to have to upgrade to encryption that will be secure against quantum computers of the future. It's possible that a full-fledged quantum computer will never come to exist. However, I mean, I think the ingenuity of humans is pretty good. And certainly right now we're seeing great gains in sensors, quantum sensors that are being used in, say, navigation that doesn't require satellites. We're seeing gains in quantum communications. So using something called QKD, or quantum key distribution protocol, along long distances. So it's a particular type of photon communication along fiber optic cables that is secure against anybody listening on the line. So that's sort of like these physical communication networks are already being upgraded and tested. And then, we have in the past, so prior to quantum computing coming around, the schemes that we use to encrypt the internet were first developed through a challenge that NIST in the US, what does it stand for? The National Institute of Standards and Technology, I believe. They had run a challenge from which was born SHA-0 and then of course later SHA-1, SHA-2, SHA-3, and RSA and things like that, which we now use to encrypt the internet. So now NIST has been running over the past couple of years a new challenge to create post-quantum computing encryption schemes, which will be secure against quantum computers. So if there are people in the audience who are thinking about potential career paths, I think a very fruitful area to look at would be in the domain of quantum communication or quantum security and encryption areas as well. Since for sure governments are mandating this now, that we're going to be upgrading everything to these new encryption schemes.
Thanks for that answer. Yeah, it sounds like a long haul to get to where we might need to be. So can anybody as any of the participants please make use of the chat or the Q&A, just so that we know that it actually works and you're not blocked from doing it. I see nothing. So if you could please, just anybody, just put in the word "the" and enter. And you can do it anonymously.
Oh,
there we go.
There we go.
So
Thank you.
appreciate that. So if anybody has any questions, please share that. Or if you have any background of where you're coming from and what your what your job is so that we can sort of get a sense for Dr. Marsden in terms of what the audience is, and so what kind of conversation that we should be having.
Yeah, and more generally, I'm sure people in the digital transformation government conference are talking a lot about obviously AI and machine learning and deep learning. These are very hot topics right now. And certainly a lot of my colleagues in the data science group specialize in these kinds of techniques. Quantum computing is sort of the new kid on the block, and maybe in 10 to 20 years will be where machine learning and AI are today. And similarly, it makes use of this new type of hardware, quantum computers, where machine learning might be making use of GPUs to have a certain niche within computing. So quantum computers will not replace regular computers. And just as machine learning isn't going to take over every single task that a regular computer can do, quantum computing won't either. But there are these specific areas of application that it will be useful for. And there will be problems that we weren't able to solve before. So for example, drug discovery is a big one, materials science. So the problem is that at the smallest levels, fundamentally, molecules, which are composed of atoms with electrons, these are fundamentally quantum mechanical objects, and classical computers do not simulate them very well. It's very difficult. So it doesn't take long to get to a scale of molecule, which we don't even think of as being very big, where a classical computer just cannot simulate it very well. And so that's one of the places where quantum computers are believed to be very fruitful in the future. And already, people are working on this, but things like protein folding, drug discovery, like what kind of combinations of molecules would bind to certain receptors in the brain, or companies like Lockheed Martin and, through government agencies, NRC, DARPA, they're all doing research into new types of materials that can enable various types of science or industry, aerospace, fuel, like jet fuel for propulsion, batteries, new types of batteries, this kind of thing. So yeah, so we're a small group within a larger group of data science and under the umbrella of data science and innovation. So we share a lot of general, we'll say, tips and tricks and day-to-day life with people who do machine learning and AI. So I'd say it's kind of similar in that vein of what the day-to-day looks like. Okay, I see a question. No.
You see the question? That's from the chat. So it says they're from Ottawa and that they're working for DND in information management and information system security and IT management. They're looking to learn more about how we attract people from diverse backgrounds into the field of STEM. I guess what makes STEM attractive to those individuals, and what perhaps about the culture detracts from the career options.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. So I didn't used to care much about company culture, or didn't think about it a lot. And over time, though, it's become more and more important to me, to the point where I would probably almost say that the culture at a place overshadows, to me, almost the work that I would be doing. And I think this is true for a lot of people over time. So I think, if we're talking about people from diverse backgrounds, on average, people from more diverse backgrounds, people from minority groups, tend to be more risk averse. And I think, in fact, government organizations can be a good place for them for that reason, because there's sort of more of a sense of security than, say, the opportunities within startup companies. Life in a startup company can be very exciting, but also a bit stressful, because there's constantly the sense that you're 2 years away from making it big and 1 year away from running out of runway funding. One thing I also, really like about larger organizations in government, which is something that wasn't clear to me at the outset. I thought that I sort of assumed coming out of academia that startups would be just have this, really cool culture and you'd be treated so well. And it's not like that's not always the case, but certainly I found that at larger organizations and in government institutions, there is more focus on providing a good experience for the employee, and that there's room and capacity to, spend time developing yourself, to grow your skills, to try new things. I know within the Government of Canada, for example, there's also these secondment programs. So you might work at the Bank of Canada, but there might be an opportunity that comes up where you can go work for the NRC or DRDC or Canadian Space Agency or one of the other organizations, Stats Canada, for a year and then come back, which is really an interesting way to broaden your career as well. So I think in terms of attracting people from diverse backgrounds, I would say really emphasizing those kinds of benefits would be good. I know too that I certainly have experienced a range of good and bad management, and I think training managers well is very important, to have the kinds of conversations where people can really be themselves and bring their full selves so that we can all benefit from everybody's skill set. So I actually I volunteer with an employee resource group at the bank called Enabled, which is for people who have disabilities of all kinds, and even people who might not classify themselves as disabled, which I didn't. I actually had a concussion at one point and was very severely limited in terms of the amount of screen time I could handle at a given time. And so I needed some sort of compensation and the ability to be flexible in my job in order to do my best work. I was able to do good work, but I needed that flexibility. And so I do think what's nice in these larger organizations and government organizations is that oftentimes it is a very secure environment to be able to have these kinds of conversations. And then as long as we disseminate this kind of training to leaders, which we should be doing, then people can really bring their full selves. And this includes people who have ADHD or might be on the spectrum, or hearing impairment. What's really nice about technology these days too is that we have the tools to have real-time closed captioning during meetings and things like that. So I would say definitely that kind of stuff. And the work-life balance, I think, in government is very good. Outside of government, less good in my experience. Oh, can't hear you.
Still muted. I'd say I'll agree with that statement about the comparison of private sector with the public sector. A lot of leeway is offered typically, which is a great thing, which means that you can focus on the work and not so much worry about other aspects of the job, like you say, losing your job and within that first year of a 2-year project or something like that you might be, I guess, burdened with in the private sector. Yeah, so you want to talk a little bit more about the work that is underway at the Bank of Canada these days, and if there's anything that you'd like to share on that topic?
Sure. So I guess I can start with some of my projects. We have been, as I kind of alluded to earlier, there is this payment system. It's a backbone for all the payments between different financial institutions, and there are similar systems across the world. And so the idea was that as these payments come into a queue, the financial institutions have to post upfront the money in order to clear the transaction. And it turns out that if you reorder the payments as they come in a little bit, then you can make that process more efficient, and those banks can actually retain some of that cash that they would otherwise have to post. And with that cash, if they don't have to post it, they could instead invest it in small businesses or, you know, other investment opportunities. So that was one project. And then another project looked at reducing carbon emissions and cost for transporting banknotes around the country, and also ensuring that the right number of banknotes was always in place so that there was never a shortage at any location. And you could imagine that lots of other organizations would have similar types of problems. So in our same military, you could imagine the logistics of needing this many people, this type of resource, that type of resource, getting to all these different locations just at the right time. Outside of my particular work, because I've only been actually at the bank for just about 2 years, let's see, some of the other projects that we've worked on would involve, there was a project looking at the incorporation of new types of digital currencies. So simulating a network of financial institutions. And then as some of these institutions decided to adopt, let's say, a new digital currency as it's introduced, understanding what effect that has on the system. So does that force other people to adopt it as well? Does everybody have to adopt it? Or will people potentially reject it? Things like that. We also want to look at economic modeling and, you know, inflation forecasting. So being able to look at, so we did a project in collaboration with Stats Canada where when you go to the grocery store, if you were to buy a banana, when it gets scanned in, that information actually gets collected. So it would say, you know, banana, whatever, 50 cents. And with that information, we're able to determine over time, okay, what is the price of produce in Vancouver versus Edmonton different? Is the rate of inflation in those two places different? Or say produce versus car parts, is that going to be different? How are these things fluctuating? So a lot of the regular indicators that we would use for inflation are lagging, so they would be months behind. And the idea behind this was that it would create a way to do what's called nowcasting. So the ability to understand, in real time what's happening with inflation. And so we used quantum natural language processing to take the words. So banana is easy to parse. You can understand that that's produce. But if it's a dark fudge, mochi, ball, whatever, the natural language processing would help identify that that was actually a dessert and it's ice cream, to be able to classify it into groups so that you could then apply the inflation statistics on the data. So those are some example projects. And then a big part of my work, aside from the advising on the security piece of things, cryptography, post-quantum cryptography, is just the development of the program itself. So developing a quantum strategy, developing roadmaps, planning projects, things like that.
Excellent. Does sound like fascinating work. I'm just wondering if we should even talk about it, or if it's something you don't want to talk about it, you can say so as well. The idea of a cryptocurrency that Canada might onboard, or if that, what kind of considerations are there around that in terms of what would, from an IT perspective, from the the perspective of potentially I guess public users, and then as well just the infrastructure that might be needed for that.
I'm not at liberty to say.
Fair enough. Okay, so that's we can move on. So nobody has any other questions? Looking at you people and the participants.
Quite shy group we've got here.
Yeah, I guess it's towards the end of the day. This is about the eighth presentation maybe that people have seen. Um, so I guess we could also talk about maybe just back to the what you'd mentioned a little bit about how sort of valuing culture over say other aspects, whether it be money, remuneration for work, or you know, location or whatever it is. I guess that might you know, compete with that culture of the work. How would you sort of approach that in terms of understanding of you know, red flags of what you might see that oh, this is something that
Hmm.
probably not going to work, and just in terms of what there's that, and there's also if you want to talk a little bit about uh, what you see as something that needs to change, I guess, a little bit more, so that those cultures are busted, I guess, and that they sort of align better with what a public service sort of environment might be like.
Yeah, this is such a fascinating topic to me. So, you know, one thing a lot of people think about when they're looking for a job or looking to switch is to network and talk to people who are at the organization that they would like to be at in order to ascertain, you know, how to get there. But I actually think it's of value now in hindsight to attempt to locate people and network with people who used to be at that organization, because they're going to be more likely. I mean, it's possible that people at the organization will be very open about the culture there, but I think people who have moved on from there might be even more willing to give you the inside scoop on what life inside that organization really is like. And I think it's something I didn't factor into my job searches enough in hindsight. Um, because you know it's pretty expensive to make a switch to start at a new place. You've at that point have quite a bias towards staying, and it would be, you know, a lot of effort to then switch again if after a few months you realize it's not a great place or a great fit for you. Um, Another point to this is I think anytime that we get the opportunity to promote, you know, good practices and good culture, we ought to. And so within our team, we certainly, when it comes to hiring and developing our processes, tend to incorporate conversations at this meta level of, you know, are we introducing bias here, or are there things we could be doing to remove bias, even if, you know, we don't think we are biased? Is there a step in this process of hiring that doesn't need to be so individualized? So can we anonymize the CVs for the first round, things like that. On top of that, I mean, I have personally witnessed people making choices to not give stage and not give room to people who are known to be bad actors in the community, which is helpful. It really supports and bolsters a good community when, you know, I wasn't necessarily always in a position of power to do this, but you know, I would have conversations on aside with, and again, this is where you have to be willing to be vulnerable and to be in a place where you can be vulnerable, but, you know, have these conversations with people to say, look, like we're hosting this event and let's look at who we're inviting to speak. And, you know, if somebody is known to be not promoting of good culture, then let's not give them the opportunity to, you know, it's that what's the word, that free advertising, right? Don't give them the free advertising.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Okay. I'm just, oh, here we go. You've got a, someone says, thanks for your time. How about finding your position as an enterprise architect, sorry, but with a business background, not knowing all the stuff related to the application and data and so on. So not sure if you want to speak to that, or if you understand. I'm not sure if there's a clear question there, or just to understand, I guess, that there's a person in the audience from a business architecture background. or someone who's looking to find a position as an EA, but is starting from the business background?
I think it's a really great exercise to think, even if I've had a certain position or role or title before, to realize how flexible that can be when you look at the skill sets. So, certainly there is room for enterprise architects with business backgrounds. I, come across people who are really strong in, say, using things like Power BI to derive value for business insight, to create KPIs, things like that. But, when I was leaving academia, for example, my title had always been, PhD student, postdoctoral scholar, or physicist. But in leaving academia, I really had to look hard at, okay, what is it I actually do, and what does that translate to? So when it came to a company like SpaceX, it was systems engineer, integration engineer, or if I was looking at in the oil and gas industry, it was reservoir specialist. So very different titles. And so it might be that they just call what you do or what your skill set is something different. And so I would allow that to broaden your search as well. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I guess that could include digital transformation as well, if you're looking to from an enterprise architecture perspective. Okay, let's see now. We could talk a little bit about, I guess, maybe some of the previous places. Have you actually been at SpaceX? Is that why you mentioned that?
I did interview there. Yeah, I was. That was one of the jobs that I was considering after leaving my postdoc. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was an interesting time and place. I got to go see a rocket on the launch pad, and go to they do a lot of stuff in-house. So back then it was about 3,000 employees, mostly based in the LA area, and they made their own vacuum pumps and all kinds of things.
I'm sure they had a lot of hooks to get a lot of new employees. Yeah, so I okay. Just asking the audience if there's any other questions. Not really seeing anything. So I'm not sure if there's anything else, any other topic you'd like to talk about, or.
Just trying to think about, the topic was, I think, women in STEM originally.
Right.
And, I personally have never found myself to be particularly sensitive to how many other women were at an organization before applying. That wasn't something that I needed to be comfortable. I always felt comfortable working with all men, mostly because I'd only ever known working with all men when I started. So it just carried on through. But I did remember in graduate school speaking with another woman in my class who said that the reason that she went there was because she saw other women there, like female professors and stuff, versus another school that she could have gone to. And so I think further to the earlier question from Michael about attracting people from diverse backgrounds into the field, I think there is this kind of chicken and egg situation too, where sometimes it can be so daunting for somebody from a minority group if you don't see anybody there who looks like you, right, in the first place. So that can be helpful, is to really keep that in mind, that, and not even just that, oh, we have people at this organization of that minority group, but that we are elevating them, where it makes sense to, and making them visible. Don't see any other questions. Do you?
How about this? Sorry, I've got a question about so the depth and the complexity of the technologies that you work with are quite vast. I'm just wondering if there's any aspect to those that you think benefit more from there being women in STEM, and as opposed to maybe that there might be areas of science or technology that typically aren't really touched upon typically, but that it attracts more women towards it in terms of, so that we're benefiting that from that as a society because women are adopting STEM.
Yeah, I think I think encouragement is a big thing. So I think, obviously women are very capable, and from what I hear, statistically, there are now as many women as men in a lot of the undergraduate STEM faculties, engineering and math and so on. So there's this idea of the leaky pipeline, but to my mind, I wonder if part of it is the perceived lifestyle and culture. And so hopefully we've already addressed some of that, especially when it comes to government, that it's government jobs can provide a really good culture and lifestyle. But just trying to think. Yeah, I mean, one thing I noticed is that, kind of going back to this idea of how you formulate your interview process, certainly I think people from different backgrounds can wind up, because of those different backgrounds, thinking about things differently, and how they solve problems might be different. And that's really what you're trying to harness, is this diversity of thought to enhance your creativity and innovation as a group. And so in the interview process, one thing we did was look at, are there people who are solving the problem that we put before them, getting to the right solution, but getting to it in a completely different way than we would have done, because that would help increase the diversity of types of thinking in our group. So that's something that did ultimately help lead us to increasing the diversity in our group. And it wasn't really on purpose. We weren't trying to set a quorum or anything like that. It was just through this idea of diversity of thinking. So embedding that kind of process might be something that would help. And yeah, I mean, I do think that there are these different strengths and weaknesses. This is sort of somewhat tangential, but maybe it'll come back around. But I had a very good friend who was in a branch of the military where women were not yet allowed to apply. And they were thinking about opening it up to women. And I mean, we've seen this over time with, firefighters and so on. And there's this idea that, the physical standard won't be met, or that there's some sort of cookie cutter mold that needs to be fit in order for the job to be done well. And it turns out that people of all kinds of backgrounds can meet the criteria and deliver it in a different way that brings new benefits that we did not foresee. So I think just, continuing to encourage those ideas and propagate them, hopefully will yield greater numbers of people applying to these jobs that historically haven't had a lot of diversity.
Very good. Thank you for that answer. Okay, so I'm seeing still no more questions, so I guess we could end it there, I guess. I really want to. Yeah. So go ahead.
I guess I would just also encourage people to talk to within your own organization or organizations that you're looking at joining. Discuss, there will be these KPIs that organizations have. Like, are there KPIs around psychological safety or company culture, things like that? Because I think that's also a good indicator of how this organization thinks and what they look to reward. And actually, I have a recent anecdote, which is that I know a woman who is in a STEM field at an organization where she was sort of deemed to be a top performer. And so when they went through a round of layoffs, she was kept. However, there were people who were let go that were deemed to be not top performers. But to her mind, she thought, I was still here at this organization. She had thought about leaving the organization. And she said, I'm still here because of these people. So if you consider that they contributed to the things that I've produced, then, maybe that's a better metric on how we should be evaluating people. So yeah, I think we all make different kinds of contributions, and how an organization measures those contributions is important. And that's something I would advocate for us moving towards, not just the bottom line of how much money was produced, et cetera. Mm-hmm.
I also just want to be thankful that, we've got a question, but I also want to mention that how great it can be to work for the Government of Canada, in which we value the mental wellness of its employees, and we're putting more and more resources into that, into just to show that that's valued. Got another question here. How does this translate into hiring practices? We know that historically, certain groups of people may not get the same opportunities. Some of these individuals may not have the same work experience or education levels, but may be competent. Is there a way to incorporate this?
Mm-hmm. I definitely think this is something. Okay, so first off, I'll just say my background is not in HR, but just from my tiny bit of experience, I have actually read this really great book called Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux, and it's this idea that at the end of the day, we all want to do well, and we're all capable if given the opportunity, for the most part, and that there should be a little more fluidity in this idea that you've brought up, that somebody may be quite competent despite lacking a particular kind of education or work experience. And I think that's starting to trickle into job postings in two ways. One, that HR departments before posting jobs really consider, does this person really need 10 years of experience? Is that actually necessary? Or can we have somebody with 2 years of experience that we train in? Thank you for putting the link to the book. And the other flip side of that is that I think it's becoming common knowledge in just amongst society that most job postings, you shouldn't necessarily feel that you need to have 100% of the qualifications in the job posting to apply, because some of those items are nice to haves, and you might actually have a very good chance of getting the post, even if you don't meet every single item on the wish list. Sorry, just going back to the question. So one thing I mean, it doesn't necessarily get you into the organization to begin, but one thing I have found is that once you are in an organization, especially one like within the Government of Canada, there is opportunity to move and grow in a way where you might say, oh, I'm really interested in this thing over here. I don't have a ton of experience, but the organization is very good at setting people up to get that experience and to make those transitions and give you the opportunities to build the education experience and to demonstrate your competency. So I do like that a lot about working within the government.
Okay, so we're back to still no questions. I don't know if you want to have another sort of final thoughts or anything like that, or
let's see. Well, I'm gonna no worries. Thanks, Michael. And actually, I'll put it out too. I see that Stenio has joined. I know Stenio. So Stenio, if you have any good questions, feel free to add them in the chat. Yeah, other than that, I would just say that I do think it's an ongoing issue, and having perused some of the literature, it's not always clear why this is so. It's not as obvious, I think, as we think. So yeah, everything that everybody can do to help, even just in the small ways of when there is a new person in your organization or in your group who's from a minority background, just, you know, making a conscious effort to be inclusive and to build rapport, I think can be helpful.
Those are great words to live by. So I just want to thank you very much, Dr. Marsden, for this discussion and this Q&A, and for all of the information that you've provided us today. All right, well, that brings our session to a close today. There's more coming tomorrow, so yeah. Looking forward to a good rest of the week for everybody. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.